I knew I was in new territory right at the beginning when these words appeared on the screen. But there was no crawl, no John Williams fanfare. But hey, as much as I hate it, I know the only constant is change. Superman doesn't wear his underwear on the outside anymore. Change is bound to happen. But those little nitpicks are about the only changes in this Star Wars story. In terms of plot, there's little we haven't already seen in 7 previous movies. It's basically the same story we've seen before. A group of rebels take on the Empire.
If the Empire has this kind of power, what chance do we have?
What chance do we have? The question is, what choice? Run, hide, plead for mercy, scatter your forces. You give way to an enemy this evil with this much power, and you condemn the galaxy to an eternity of submission. The time to fight is now!
I know saying this might be sacrilege, but one would think that in 7 movies, there would be other threats to the galaxy other than just the Empire. Now, I know I'm not being totally fair, because I know this is a prequel to A New Hope, so I won't harp on that. I just know that there was one point in the movie where I felt like, okay, I think they've come up with every possible means of filming TIE fighters and X-Wings in battle. They've shot every possible angle of the Death Star that they could possibly shoot. But I have to give it to Gareth Edwards in that he shoots this stuff, which I've seen over and over again since 1977. He shoots it with his visual depiction of this stuff, the way the camera moves over the Death Star as the firing dish recesses into place, the way a Star Destroyer looms over an entire city. All this stuff feels fresh behind the lens of his camera. This film is a visual feast. I must say, it looks like in general he studied the Star Wars films, stayed true to the style of cinematography from those films, but occasionally throws in some visual flair that I've never seen in a Star Wars film before. I did miss the cheesy wipes and the old-fashioned circle transitions that are customary for a Star Wars movie. The biggest problems I had with this movie were with the characters and the pacing of the first half. Felicity Jones, who starred with Tom Hanks in Inferno this year. Yeah, you know, the Ron Howard movie, sequel to the Da Vinci Code, came out a couple months ago. Well, okay, anyway, she plays Jyn Erso, and her character is pretty much the only character who really gets a backstory. And it's a really intriguing one, which I wish they would have explored more. Not to give anything away, but I've always been interested in the theme of visiting the sins of the parents on the children. They touch on that slightly, but not enough as they could have. We do get to know some of the other characters on Jyn's team, but I'm just not sure that I got enough to make me care about them fully. Diego Luna plays Cassian Andor, who's kind of got that Han Solo thing going on, but he makes it clear that he shoots first. He grew on me as the story progressed, and we get some insight into his character at the beginning, but he gets no history at all. The same thing goes for the character Saw Gerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker. He's an interesting character who's a savior to a young Jyn Erso. He comes to her aid as a child, kind of takes her under his wing, and although we hear about his exploits against the Empire in dialogue, we don't see any of it, and we hardly get any backstory. We don't get any development with him raising Jyn, and he really doesn't get much screen time. If anyone deserved to get more development, more backstory, since he played an integral part in Jyn Erso's development, it's this guy. But he doesn't get much screen time. We do learn that he has some really strange pets. Riz Ahmed, who was in Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal, he's great as an Imperial defector, and I liked his character and wanted to know more about him. I didn't get much more about him. And Donnie Yen, listen, I know I'm opening myself up to some scorn for not knowing more about him, but after seeing how this dude gets down, I've got to check out his movies. But he also gets no development. How do you have a blind man who kicks ass the way he does and not tell me anything about him, how he got his abilities, what made it, why is he blind? Another character that I just really wanted to know more about, but I didn't get much. And if you're thinking, well, they didn't have time to develop all these characters in a 2-hour film, well, maybe you're too young to remember James Cameron's Aliens movie, which had a whole unit of Marines, and the writers had me invested in every one of them. So the fact that I had all these characters, which were basically interesting people, and had nothing to go on with them, I had nothing invested in them, that was a big issue. The second issue, as I said, was pacing. The first half of this film is, well, it's pretty slow and very dialogue heavy. I almost fell asleep a couple times. It's heavy on exposition and putting all the pieces together for the second half of the movie. But once the movie enters that second half, it takes off like a rocket. I gotta say, this is the first Star Wars movie where it actually felt like war was being waged. People die, and you see the death on their faces. People die in each other's arms in this movie. And unless you want to count the Ewok battle in Return of the Jedi, this movie gives us a battle where there are boots on the ground, the stakes are high, and people die. It would have been nice, though, if all the characters had been sufficiently developed so that I would feel something when they get injured or die. But it was great to feel like there were serious life or death stakes in a Star Wars battle. Another small thing I noticed was that some of the dialogue got really hokey, and it stood out like a sore thumb because for the most part, the script was well written. We get to see some very familiar faces from the past. There's one character I was thrilled to see, but this person probably should have been used more sparingly because the CGI after a while got distracting. But for all I've said, there's one thing that makes this film worth seeing. 2 words: Darth motherfucking Vader. Yo, he's only on screen for a few minutes, but he appears in one scene near the end and it is awesome. Easily the best scene of the film. Now, I respect the fact they didn't want Vader to be too prominent in this movie, but I saw that scene and I was like, you spent screen time showing me giant mind-reading squids when that time could have been devoted to Darth kicking ass. I've never seen Vader like that ever in any of the films, and it was amazing. I needed much more of that. That scene was brilliant. It was tense. It didn't last that long, but it was tense. I was gripping my seat. Even though I knew what was going to happen, I was gripping the edge of my seat. I've never seen Vader so fierce before. I mean, you know, when he fights Luke in Return of the Jedi and in Empire, he's pretty badass then. But here, this was a Darth Vader that I just go see it. I'm not going to say any more, but man, it was amazing to see. It was great to see that. Now, if the first half of this movie had better pacing, less exposition, and if the characters had been a little more fleshed out, this movie would have easily gotten 4 out of 5 reels. As it is, because the second half is so good, I'm going to give it 3.5. Now, before I go, I should mention that this is the first Star Wars movie without the music of the legendary John Williams, one of my heroes. But I have to give a shout out to the guy who appears to be in the position to take the baton from Williams, and that would be Michael Giacchino, who composed the score. There are some passages that sound like direct lifts from earlier Star Wars films, but overall I think the Star Wars music, which is part of the magic of this franchise, is in good hands with Giacchino. And that's the martini.